My name's Tim Coulong. I know a number of you here in the audience. Some of you have actually seen me talk on high tunnels before, so some of this may be a repeat for some of you in the audience, but hopefully we'll have some new stuff here. I don't know a large number of you, so hopefully you can get some useful information out of this. How many people here currently have high tunnels up? Okay, so about 30–40%. This is good. How many of those are interested in the NRCS Equip program? Okay, so that's good. Well, we just recently had a couple of larger trainings for the NRCS folks over at the farm in Lexington, and a number of our extension agents at the county level as well. And so I just got some new updates on the Equip program for the 2013 year, so I wanted to go through those very quickly at the beginning here, just for those that are considering applying for the upcoming year. All right. So the EQUIP program, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, if you're trying to Google it, Seasonal High Tunnel Initiative 2013. In 2012, in Kentucky, they approved 227 applications, which is really pretty phenomenal. Kentucky was one of the last states. It was a pilot program for 3 years around the country, and Kentucky was not included. And then last year, the program went national, and obviously we were included. And so NRCS funded 227 applications in 2012. Out of that number, you know, just because you get an application approved doesn't mean everyone's going to be going into it. But it probably means for those of you that have been growing in tunnels for a while, that there's going to be a good bit more competition and so forth. And so you're going to have to start thinking about diversifying what you grow. If you were funded, you have 1 year to implement the practice, to have your high tunnel completely built and sealed and ready to go. If it's any longer than that, you generally won't get your check. But for those folks that are in here and fired up and ready to go, I don't think that'll be a problem. And of course, you're only paid when the tunnel's completed, and that means it's a completed practice. The end walls are on, the side walls are there, the plastic's up, the whole thing's turnkey, ready to go. There's been a couple of instances, different parts of the state, where folks didn't have end walls on or that sort of thing, and the practice couldn't be considered complete. So for it to be completed, NRCS has told us it has to be kind of a turnkey type setup. Last year there were 3 application deadlines. This year there's only going to be 2. There's going to be one in early winter, which is early to mid-January. They haven't set the date yet, but if you're interested for 2013, go ahead and get in. So when you got yours approved, they just said to the end of the calendar year, not a complete full year. See, that's different from what they were telling us. They were telling us that you had a complete year to finish the project. So it, and that doesn't surprise me that there's ambiguity and things there, because when this program first started going, since it was new for us, there was a lot of folks kind of scrambling, particularly in counties that don't have much high tunnel or vegetable production. You know, if they're used to doing grain crops and that sort of thing, this is very unfamiliar to them. But for this year, the early winter deadline, if you're interested, go ahead and get your application in, because it will be in early to mid-January, and that's coming up. And then there will be another one in early spring, which they consider to be late March, early April. And you cannot start purchasing until all the paperwork is signed and completed. We did have a couple instances where folks went ahead and started buying things for their kit, and they were having problems getting reimbursed. Some of the pay rates have changed for 2013. Of course, the maximum size is still the same. It's 1/20th of an acre, which is about 2,178 square feet. So you get reimbursed realistically for a 30 by 72. You can build as big as you would like. You can build a 96-footer, but they'll only reimburse you for that 2,178 square feet. Last year it did not pay for materials and supplies. Instead, it was a cost share that paid for the installation. This year, it actually is a cost share that pays for materials and supplies. It's just kind of semantics and wording, but that is a change. And then probably the thing that you're probably most interested in, last year it was $2.57 or 58 cents a square foot. This year it's going to be $2.37 a square foot. So the price, what you're getting reimbursed, did go down. And if you're a historically underserved farmer, it went from, I believe it was like $3.10 in that range, 308. It has dropped to $2.84. And these prices are set at the national level, so just keep that in mind. And it also must be a kit from a manufacturer. Can't build your own. And being a kit from a manufacturer essentially means that it has some instructions with it, and it has a parts list and so forth. And we've had some instances around the state where people have bought kits that were supposed to be kits but were less than, maybe perhaps less than a kit. And I won't go into that here. Obviously, it's got to still be same as last year. It's got to be treated as a high tunnel, not a greenhouse. You have to grow in the soil, no benches or containers, but you can grow in raised beds. And here's a shot of one down in southeast Kentucky where they actually put a raised bed type system in. That's fine as long as it's in the ground. You can have vent fans and heaters. And this starts moving from high tunnel to greenhouse territory, but as long as it's at your own expense, you can have vent fans and heaters in there. And so that is something that last year wasn't necessarily specified, but will be, that's okay if you want to go that direction, just as long as you're not growing in containers.
Could you retrofit the one you built this year?
Yes, as long as you're still growing in the ground, you could retrofit. And we did have some questions. Well, if I'm growing in the ground, can I have hanging baskets above my plants? No, everything has to be in the ground, no containers, at least for 4 years. Then you can do whatever you like. They can be fixed or movable. That's not a problem. They have a 4-year lifespan of the practice, and so within that 4 years, you're responsible for maintaining that structure. Something happens to it, it's on you. However, I did talk to some folks at NRCS, and if there was some sort of natural disaster that came in, where we had a really big tropical storm that came up and looped through Kentucky, or we had a tremendous ice storm where large numbers of these were taken out. They didn't set kind of guidelines for that, but they said that they would be fairly reasonable in what people's expectations would be as far as maintenance. So take that for what you... here's the link to the website, or just Google NRCS high tunnel program, and the first one that comes up will be the one. So as far as types of tunnels, this is obviously for some of you in here, this will be kind of old news, but I did want to cover it for those that are new to tunnels. Offered by many manufacturers, some of the common kits, Atlas, Jaderloom, FarmTech, Haygrove, and there were some other ones as well. Deerfield Supplies down in the western part of the state is selling a very good kit as well. Tony Silvanero, who was in the back earlier, he said he bought one and was very, very satisfied with the quality of it. Typically, they're ranging from $2 to $3 a square foot. Atlas 30 by 72s that we put up at the Hort Research Farm that Dr. Jacobson, Krista Jacobson, put up were about $5,500 for the materials and in the kit, and then for the end walls and all the ancillary parts and so forth, it was about another $1,000 or so. Different types of tunnels. Haygroves. Does anyone in here have a Haygrove style tunnel? Okay. I did want to cover Haygroves just because I do get a fair number of questions around the state. Haygrove is a manufacturer originally out of the UK. These are used by a lot of growers in the Pennsylvania, mid-Atlantic area, and then up into some of the upper Midwest regions. Haygroves are a nice product. Probably the nice thing about them is that you can interconnect them. And so the bows on them here, it's hard to see in the picture, but the anchors actually have a little V shape at top. And you can put your bows into that. So if you want to expand next year, you can build a range, so on like this. They're very, very tall, and so you can get large pieces of equipment in them. And some folks grow them, grow berries and some of the bigger crops in them. However, with that benefit, one of the drawbacks is that in our experiences, they're a little bit tougher to seal up tight, and we don't get the season extension benefits that we do out of a more traditional high tunnel. Typically, these are single-layer plastic structures, and we just do not get the temperature increase that you do. So if you're really interested in pure season extension, the traditional Haygrove style, they do make some other styles, but the traditional Haygrove might not necessarily be your best choice. They're really nice for keeping the rain off crops, so a lot of organic growers use them. because it does keep their crop cleaner. And in Kentucky, a lot of our diseases, tomatoes, peppers, and so on, are all rain dispersed diseases. And so for organic growers, they do have they do serve an important need, but for season extension, they might not be the best choice. Conversely, because of that, they're very easy to vent, high sidewalls, and so they're not going to burn your crop up in the summer. Your traditional high tunnels here, this is a tunnel from a grower outside of Owensboro. This is a very stout structure here. You can see the trusses here, and then the supports coming down. And this particular grower has additional snow bracing on the bows here. This adds an extra expense, but this is a very, very stout tunnel. You'll notice in this picture that there are no roll-up sidewalls. This grower, after 2 years of this, decided to go with the roll-up sidewalls, just couldn't vent it properly. Had end walls that he removed at the start of late spring, but it just still didn't vent. But this is a very, very stout structure. The price tag on this, turnkey, he had someone install it. The ground was already graded. Installation costs and tunnel was just over $8,500. And so it's stout, it's nice, but he paid for it too. More of the traditional high tunnels, these are the Atlas 30 by 72s. And mind you, you can get any of that more robust bracing with any of these as an option. But here, the typical high tunnel would just come with a single brace across the top there. So still good, still plenty strong here in Kentucky, but not as robust as some of those other systems. Yes? And that's something, if you implement your practice in year 1, year 2, you can go back and add those bracing and stuff if the initial cost is too high. Just kind of like a hoop house without any trusses across it. You could. It'd probably be a little pricier because you're going to have to buy some brackets and so forth. But yeah, you could certainly add bracing. If you've got a real small hoop house, the span might not be so much that you need it. If you've got something that's 6 feet tall, kind of a smaller tunnel that's maybe 12 feet across, a real small hoop house. Oh, it is 30. Okay.
Yeah, but it's the regular.
Yeah, then you can definitely add bracing to it. Certainly. I've seen a number of tunnels around the state. I've seen tunnels made out of everything, pretty much. Gentleman had a bunch of trusses left over from a project, made a tunnel. Obviously, this is homemade. It wouldn't be covered by the NRCS. It was strong. It wasn't going to go anywhere. But one of the downsides of this is all of this wood here blocks sunlight, and you get a tremendous amount of shading. And so this works. It was free for this particular grower, but it's not something I would necessarily recommend. And then this is what I was referring to, just a small cold frame. They're used all over the state. Again, probably wouldn't be part of the NRCS program, but certainly probably the most inexpensive way to get into this. For your end walls, double layer polycarbonate, or some folks will call it Lexan, has about the same R value as 2 layers of inflated plastic. And so if you're going to do an end wall, I would either do a polycarbonate end wall, or if you have a 2x4 end wall, which most folks do, put plastic on either side of that. That dead air space will help increase your R value. If you just have a single layer of plastic on that end wall, you're going to lose a tremendous amount of heat through that. Just that single layer of plastic has very, very, very little R value at all. And so if you're going to go to the trouble of putting this up, in the spring and summer, you don't need 2 layers of plastic here, but I would definitely have a layer of plastic on either side. Or go with the polycarbonate. But the polycarbonate ranges from $45 to $65 a sheet, so the plastic's a heck of a lot less expensive. It's a little bit more amenable to work with too. You can always change it. Yeah, it's a pricey option, certainly. Movable tunnels. And those of you that have been out to the Hort Research Farm have probably seen some of these movable tunnels that Dr. Jacobson has in place, but I did want to cover them briefly because I think that this is going to be an issue as more and more individuals get into this. Tunnels can be, I think, fairly readily moved. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it can be done. 2 types of systems. Probably the most popular is the skid system, and that's basically what it sounds like, just dragging your tunnel. Elliot Coleman has originally he did a lot of skid systems. He's got some on wheels now and so forth. And we've got 2 options out at the farm that Krista did. Wood with an angle iron. It's actually aluminum. It's 4x4 angled aluminum onto your toe board, and then it angles underneath it like a ski. And I'll show that. And then one, instead of having the aluminum, there's some Trex decking bolted to the toe board. The reason we use Trex decking is because it's certified organic land, and we didn't want to have treated lumber coming in contact with the soil. If you're not certified organic, you could put a 2x6 or 2x8 on there and bolt it in there. And then the rail system. And this is, there's a company out there, Rimall, that sells the rail system under the name Rolling Thunder. We kind of took the idea and made our own because it was a lot cheaper. So for the rail system, I just want to real briefly cover it if there's anyone interested. We used a 14-gauge galvanized rail from a fencing company. It's a little bit thicker than a standard galvanized rail you'd get from Lowe's for fencing. And basically, we used wheels that are chain link fence gate wheels on the large gates. Now Johnny sells these, I think, for 12 or 13 bucks a piece in their catalog, which is a good bit cheaper than some of the fencing manufacturers. They do have that volume, and so they can cut the price down. It added about probably closer to $2,000 to the cost of the tunnel, so it wasn't cheap. But one thing to keep in mind is if you do buy any sort of movable system, when you buy a tunnel kit, the ground posts are generally going to be put in the ground 18 inches, 24 inches or so. And so let's say that 2 feet of those ground posts that you're not putting in the ground, that's going to be up above the ground. So because of that, you can actually go with a shorter sidewall and save yourself some money there. Because if you're 2 feet up out of the ground, if you buy a 4-foot sidewall instead of a 6-foot, you can save some money and still at the end of the day come out with a 6-foot sidewall. And that's something we completely did not think about until we had everything and had to cut the ground posts. We're like, well, this is just kind of a waste. But that's something I think that can save you a little bit of money. To anchor the system down, we use earth anchors, which are basically vineyard anchors. They're 36 inches. They're basically like big tree stakes, essentially, and I'll show them. Here's the one on rails, the movable tunnel. Here's a cover crop field that would be moved over. So here's the toe board and the rail that it sits on. And that's obviously the gate fence wheel that you can pick up from John.